When I found those files, I knew there was something terribly wrong with the Apollo 10 mission. I had seen many things during my time at ESA, but nothing like this. Those secrets should have stayed buried on the moon, and now, as I watch the shadows in this underground bunker, I feel the weight of what is about to be unleashed. If I had known what I would discover, I never would have accepted that call. I worked for ESA for years. It was my life, what I had always dreamed of. I spent my days between reports, data analysis, and endless meetings about space missions. But there was something else, something that didn't add up. I asked questions that had no answers, questions about certain classified files that always seemed out of my reach. It was 1993 when I pushed too hard. They sidelined me, called it a reassignment. It was an elegant way of saying I was finished for them. They turned me into a pariah in my own field, relegated me to insignificant tasks, far from any relevant research. Rumors spread. People began to avoid me in the hallways. Those who were once colleagues became shadows that looked at me sideways. I ended up resigning, but in reality they fired me without saying it out loud. Years passed, years in which I tried to rebuild my life away from all that, but the resentment grew every day. Then, one night, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "We know what they did to you. We want you to know the truth." The guy introduced himself as an infiltrator, someone inside ESA who had seen what no one else had seen. He gave me the coordinates of a secret facility in the Black Forest and told me that I would find answers there. I thought about it for days, almost let it pass, but the anger was stronger. I gathered a small group of people like me, disillusioned and looking for something to hold on to. We headed to that facility, not knowing we were about to face something much worse than the betrayal of a former employer. After years of being relegated to oblivion, of being seen as a shadow in the field where I was once respected, I thought my life had been reduced to an unbearable monotony. But then came that call in the middle of the night. The voice on the other end was cold, almost mechanical. He told me about Apollo 10 and 8, a mission that, according to all official records, never existed. But that voice knew too much. He gave me coordinates and told me about a secret facility in the Black Forest, a place that ESA uses as a facade for technological tests, but which is actually a bunker full of secrets from space expeditions that should never have been unearthed. I couldn't ignore what I heard. Years of resentment and need for redemption were boiling inside me. I contacted Rebecca Miller, a brilliant hacker with a past at ESA who, like me, was betrayed by the same institution she used to idolize. Rebecca had worked at that facility before they removed her from her post for snooping in files that were too sensitive. She also had unfinished business, and when I told her what I had discovered, she didn't hesitate to join. "Are you sure you can hack the security system?" I asked her. "If I manage to get into ESA's servers, this will be child's play," Rebecca replied with a confident smile. Together, we began to plan the infiltration. We knew we needed more hands, and not just anyone. Rebecca contacted Johann Bulldog Hoffman, a mercenary with tactical skills who once worked for ESA, but not in the way people imagine. His job was to make all evidence of unrecognized life disappear, UFOs, extraterrestrial traces. Everything had to be erased from the face of the earth before the press or any civilian could even suspect. Bulldog had seen things that most only dare to imagine, and now, with his life turned into a downward spiral, he was willing to accept any job that would give him a purpose, even a suicidal one. "What's in it for me?" Bulldog asked as he cleaned his weapon. "An opportunity to redeem yourself, to do something worthwhile," I told him, knowing those words would resonate with him. Then there was Dr. Marcus Weber, a former colleague of mine who was still trapped inside ESA. We had grown apart after my fall, but I always assumed he still had doubts, questions he couldn't ask without risking his own career. When I told him about what I had discovered, his silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Marcus wanted to help, even if it meant betraying the institution to which he had dedicated his life. "Are you sure about this, Marcus?" I asked, knowing the risk he was taking. "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied with a determination I hadn't seen in years. Eva Schmidt, an independent journalist, was the next to join. Eva had dedicated years to trying to bring to light the truth about UFO sightings and other suspicious ESA activities. Every time one of her stories was ready to be published, something happened. Her sources disappeared. Her articles were discredited as mere stories. She was tired of her efforts being in vain, and when I contacted her, I saw in her eyes the same determination I felt inside. Finally, we recruited Leopold Leo Bauer, a retired engineer who had helped build the first lunar facilities. He was unfairly fired after a miscalculation that caused an accident in one of the containment chambers. Leo had been removed from what he loved, and that wound had not yet healed. The opportunity to return, to correct the error that had banished him, was something he could not refuse. "This isn't just for me. It's for everyone who ever believed in what we did," I told him, and he nodded that it was the truth. So, with a team as diverse as it was dangerous, we embarked on a mission that we knew could be our last. The truth was hidden in that bunker in the Black Forest, and we were willing to unearth it no matter the cost. Getting into the facility was easier than we thought, but we knew we were walking on dangerous ground. Rebecca deactivated the security measures from a van we had hidden several kilometers from the base, hidden among the trees. Meanwhile, Johann Bulldog Hoffman used his contacts to have a friend of his who drove supply trucks get us in as part of a food shipment. Nobody questions much when they think you're just carrying groceries for employees at a secret base in the middle of the forest. "Remember, once inside there's no turning back," Bulldog warned us. As we prepared to enter, once inside, the suffocating heat of the forest was replaced by a cold air that made my hair stand on end. The place had changed a lot since the last time Rebecca was there. According to what she had told us, what was once a simple underground bunker was now full of strange technology, as if taken from a science fiction movie, and the guards. There were many more than we expected, all armed to the teeth. Something very important was happening there, something that needed a very high level of security. We waited for the guard change to move. Adrenaline had me on edge. Every noise seemed like a danger. We advanced through the corridors, mentally noting everything strange we saw. The metal walls reflected our distorted shadows, as if the building itself was watching us. Then we saw the containment chambers. They were huge, lined up in a room that seemed to have no end. Inside them, creatures I had never seen. Their bodies were deformed. They looked alien. Seeing them turned my stomach. They were beings that should not exist. But there they were, trapped just a few meters from us. This is impossible," said Marcus, his voice trembling. We went on, looking for the office that Rebecca had identified in the plans. Marcus and Leo took care of opening the door. We found voice recordings, whispers in languages we didn't recognize, but which weren't human. The documents described inhumane experiments, vivisection, endurance tests, attempts to communicate with entities we didn't understand. It became clear that the Apollo 10 and 8 missions were not just a lunar exploration. They had found something on the moon, something that should never have been brought back. As I frantically reviewed the files, Dr. Evelyn Schultz entered the room. Her presence was unsettling, but at that moment we were too focused on the information to notice her attitude. She approached the screen and looked at the recording with an inscrutable expression, as if all of this was not a surprise to her. "They shouldn't have brought this back," Schultz muttered, more to herself than to us. Dr. Schultz began to speak. Her voice was strangely calm. She revealed to us that ESA had had contact with these beings long before Apollo 18. Not only were they capable of understanding us, but they could also speak our language. They were a species so advanced that, according to her, they could ridicule the greatest philosophers on our planet. But there was something in her tone, something that put me on alert. She began to talk about doors that should never have been opened, knowledge that was better left buried. "There are things it's better not to know," she said, her voice sounding increasingly distant as we continued investigating. I noticed that Dr. Schultz was becoming stranger, more distant. She no longer seemed like the ally who had helped us from the beginning. There was a gleam in her eyes that I couldn't decipher, as if she knew something we didn't. She was beginning to show her true nature, and although I didn't want to admit it, I knew something wasn't right. We had opened a Pandora's box, and I was beginning to wonder if we hadn't made a fatal mistake by entering that facility. Finally, we found what we had been looking for. Among the dusty files and old tape recordings, we came across the data from the Apollo 18 mission. We sat around a small screen, anxious and nervous, and began to watch the recording. What we saw left us frozen. The Apollo 18 astronauts had found something on the moon, something no one expected. The camera showed a desolate landscape until, in the distance, a structure appeared. It was a dark, alien temple made of a material we couldn't identify. It didn't belong to this world. The astronauts entered. Their breathing was the only thing that broke the silence. Inside, they found life forms they had never seen, creatures that couldn't be from Earth. The recording became chaotic. The astronauts screamed, the camera shook, and then silence. They disappeared without a trace. At that moment, we understood that ESA had hidden something terrible. The documents we found confirmed our worst fears. ESA had tried to use these creatures to gain an advantage in the Cold War. They wanted to use them as weapons or as a source of superior knowledge. But the project went terribly wrong. Not only could they not control the creatures, but they also caused the disappearance of the lunar team. Dr. Schultz approached the screen and looked at the recording with an inscrutable expression, as if all of this was not a surprise to her. "They shouldn't have brought this back," Schultz muttered, more to herself than to us. Dr. Schultz began to speak. Her voice was strangely calm. She revealed to us that ESA had had contact with these beings long before Apollo 10 and 8. Not only were they capable of understanding us, but they could also speak our language. They were a species so advanced that, according to her, they could ridicule the greatest philosophers on our planet. But there was something in her tone, something that put me on alert. She began to talk about doors that should never have been opened, knowledge that was better left buried. "There are things it's better not to know," she said, her voice sounding increasingly distant as we continued investigating. I noticed that Dr. Schultz was becoming stranger, more distant. She no longer seemed like the ally who had helped us from the beginning. There was a gleam in her eyes that I couldn't decipher, as if she knew something we didn't. She was beginning to show her true nature and, although I didn't want to admit it, I knew something wasn't right. We had opened a Pandora's box, and I was beginning to wonder if we hadn't made a fatal mistake by entering that facility. We thought we had enough evidence to expose the truth. We were ready to leave that facility and take what we had found to the world. But just as we were beginning to pack up the files, the doors burst open and we found ourselves surrounded by the base's security forces. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. They were yelling at us to get down, but Dr. Schultz was still standing, no longer with that ambiguous attitude she had shown until now. She looked cold, distant, and when she opened her mouth, we understood everything. She told us that she had been part of the Apollo 10-8 mission. She was one of the few survivors, and that she had made a dark pact with those creatures on the moon. According to her, that pact had allowed her to maintain her power and position at ESA all these years. Why? I asked, feeling everything crumbling. Because there are things bigger than you and me, things that need control, she replied with a coldness that chilled my blood. Everything had been a trap. She had guided us from the beginning, pretending to be our ally, but her intention had always been to deliver us to the creatures as sacrifices. She said it was the only way to maintain a fragile balance between our world and that of those extraterrestrial entities. My mind could barely process what she was saying. She had led us directly to our own graves. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Johann Bulldog Hoffman, with the fury of a man with nothing to lose, launched himself against the guards. His combat experience was evident, and although he managed to take down several of them, the fight was fierce. Bullets were flying everywhere, bouncing off the metal walls of the bunker. Hoffman faced the security men with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. He received several shots and fell seriously wounded, but not before giving us a chance to try to escape. "Run! It's going to end!" Hoffman shouted as he fell to the ground, covered in blood. As the battle unfolded, another terrifying sound filled the air. The containment chambers of the creatures began to open. The creatures, those things that don't belong to our world, were being released. I could feel terror taking over me, but I also knew there was no time for that. We were trapped between the base security and those entities that shouldn't exist. In the midst of all that chaos, Dr. Schultz watched with cold satisfaction on her face. For her, this was just the fulfillment of her plan. For us, it was a nightmare from which we might not come out alive. There were few of us left. Johann Bulldog Hoffman and Leopold Bauer had fallen, sacrificing themselves to give us one last chance. We were exhausted, wounded, and surrounded by creatures that should never have been released. Dr. Schultz, standing in front of us, looked at us with a mixture of contempt and satisfaction. For her, we were already dead from the moment we crossed the doors of that facility. With a coldness that chilled my blood, Dr. Schultz began to speak. She revealed that ESA had always known about the risks, that they had sacrificed the crews of Apollo 10 and 8 to obtain the alien power that those creatures possessed. Everything had been planned from the beginning. Human lives were a small price to pay for the power and knowledge they sought. "They were pawns just like you," she said, without a trace of remorse. We knew we couldn't reason with her, that she was completely consumed by her pact with those creatures. With a quick movement, she tried to provoke the monsters that were already out of their containment chambers, trying to direct them towards us, seeking to destroy us once and for all. But I wasn't willing to die there, not without fighting to the end. In that moment of desperation, I remembered the smoke grenade I had saved, waiting for the right moment to use it. This was the moment. I dropped it on the floor, and a dense white cloud filled the room. The confusion that followed gave us an opportunity. As Dr. Schultz screamed in fury, trying to control the situation, we ran towards the exit. "Quick, this way!" I shouted, guiding the others towards the only exit left. But she wasn't going to let us escape from the creatures she had unleashed, but the cost was high. Johann Bulldog Hoffman and Leopold Bauer didn't survive. They had given everything they had in that final battle, sacrificing themselves to ensure that those creatures and Dr. Schultz couldn't continue their terror. The facility was in total chaos, and as the few of us left ran for our lives, I couldn't help but feel a bitter mixture of triumph and loss. We had destroyed Dr. Schultz and those unknown beings, but at a price that perhaps wasn't worth paying. We barely managed to escape. Marcus, Ava, and I left that facility wounded and exhausted, but alive. Rebecca, who had been outside monitoring everything, helped us get out at the last moment. We carried with us a device that contained the truth about Apollo 10 and 8 and the creatures they had brought from the moon. We knew that what we had discovered would change everything, But we also knew that our lives would never be the same again. The truth had to come to light, but doing so would put our lives in danger. Still, I decided to try. With Rebecca's help, we sent an encrypted message to several media outlets, hoping that someone, somewhere, would receive it and dare to publish it. But before those messages could reach their destination, they were intercepted by the German intelligence services, ESA, and those who controlled the secrets. They would not allow the truth to come to light so easily. "It can't be," Rebecca murmured upon seeing that the messages hadn't. "It can't be," Rebecca murmured upon seeing that the messages hadn't reached their destination. "We tried. Now we have to prepare for what's coming," I replied, knowing that the worst was yet to come. Over time, one by one, my companions were hunted down. Marcus and Eva both were eliminated to ensure that the truth remained hidden. Rebecca, being outside the facility, managed to stay hidden for longer, but eventually she too was caught. I became the last survivor of our team. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for me too, but I wasn't going to sit idly by. I've spent years in the shadows, hiding and waiting for the right moment. The world deserves to know what really happened, what ESA has been hiding all this time. The secret has become a whisper, a rumor that can no longer be silenced. And I know that soon, very soon, that terrible secret will come to light, revealing what many suspect, but few dare to believe. "They can't hide this forever," I whispered to myself, preparing for what I had to do. "I can't say how much longer I'll be able to stay hidden, but one thing is certain. What I found, what we discovered in that facility, will be revealed. The truth is imminent, and, when it comes to light, there will be no way to stop it." As I sit here in this dimly lit room in Berlin, I can't help but think about how it all started. The weight of the truth we uncovered in that Black Forest facility still haunts me. Every shadow seems to hide a threat. Every unexpected sound makes me jump. But I can't let fear paralyze me. Not now, when we're so close to exposing everything. I've been moving from city to city across Germany, never staying in one place for too long. Hamburg, Munich, Frankfurt. Each offered temporary refuge, but nowhere feels safe anymore. I've learned to blend in, to become just another face in the crowd. But I know they're still looking for me, the same people who silenced my friends, who would do anything to keep their secrets buried. Last week, I thought I saw Dr. Schultz in a busy street in Cologne. For a moment our eyes met, and I felt that same cold dread I experienced in the facility. But when I looked again, she was gone. Was it really her, or is paranoia finally getting the better of me? I can't be sure anymore. The device we took from the facility, the one containing all the evidence, has become both my lifeline and my greatest burden. I've made copies, hidden them in secure locations across the country. If anything happens to me, the truth will still find its way out. It has to. I've been trying to make contact with journalists, whistleblowers, anyone who might be willing to listen and brave enough to act. But it's a dangerous game. How can I know who to trust when the enemy seems to have eyes and ears everywhere? Sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if it was all worth it. The lives lost, the sacrifices made. But then I remember the horrors we saw in that bunker, the implications of what ESA has been hiding, and I know we had no choice. The world needs to know, no matter the cost. I've started compiling all our findings into a comprehensive report. It's risky, but necessary. If I disappear, at least there will be a record, a testament to what we discovered and what it could mean for humanity. The thought that this might be my legacy both terrifies and motivates me. There are nights when I dream of the moon, of that alien structure we saw in the Apollo 18 footage. In these dreams, I'm there, walking on the lunar surface, approaching the dark temple. But as I get closer, I always wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of otherworldly whispers still ringing in my ears. I've tried to rationalize what we saw, to find some logical explanation that doesn't involve extraterrestrial life forms making pacts with our space agencies, but the evidence is overwhelming. The creatures in those containment chambers, the advanced technology, the lengths ESA has gone to keep it all hidden. It all points to a truth almost too fantastic to believe. Yet, amidst all this darkness, there's a glimmer of hope. I've started noticing subtle changes in public discourse. More people are asking questions, challenging official narratives about our space programs. It's as if, on some subconscious level, humanity is preparing itself for the revelation that's to come. I know my time might be running out. Each day could be my last. But I'm determined to see this through. The truth about Apollo 10 and 8, about what's really out there in space, and what our governments have been hiding, it all needs to come to light. As I finish writing this account, I can hear footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Heavy, purposeful steps. My heart races as I quickly save this document and prepare to run again. But even if they catch me this time, it's too late. The wheels are in motion. The truth is out there, scattered across Germany, waiting to be found. And when it finally comes to light, the world will never be the same again.